Alright, so what I'm doing with this to start off with is I'm gonna sculpt the Krayt Dragon bones. For this I'm going to use milliput to sculpt the base bones, and then I'll cast them and do them in resin so I can make multiple copies. The reason that I'm going to use milliput and not clay is because this will dry solid, so it's just easier to keep a master copy for casting, and this stuff works really well with small details. So all the separate milliput pieces have been sanded a little bit, added a couple more sort of like dents in the bones with an engraver, and I'll just glue them to a bit of foam core and just made a little foam core box around them. So we will be using this to make our mould, and so we're just going to be using casting silicone for this. This stuff is pretty simple to use, but it takes about 8 hours to properly set. So we're just going to do this and leave it overnight, come back to it tomorrow, and we should be able to pull out some really nice moulds of these pieces. Silicone is now set, solid. So now what we can do is we can tear the box mould apart. Alright, so some of them are stuck in the mould. The silicone has got underneath it, but it's only a thin layer, so what we do now is we just take these bits, start cutting away at them with a blade. Now we're going to fill these with resin, see how well they come out. I just use just a standard casting resin for this. The brand I use is Polycraft SG2000 PU casting resin. It's one that sets pretty quickly and is paintable straight out of the mould. So you know, it's pretty good, we're not going to use a huge amount for this, but good practice if you're making moulds. If you do have a mould of something else nearby, if you have a little bit too much that you've mixed up, you can always put some in there and just keep building out with leftovers. So that's what I've got to do. I've got a spare mould of something else I'm working on here, so let's mix it up. So several pulls out of the mould later, we've got a nice little pile of bones of different shapes and sizes, and we've got this, which is the base that I'm just going to be sculpting on. Just jotted out a rough shape of what we're going to do, and I've got this, which is an oil-based clay. This is New Plast, if I remember the brand name correctly. This stuff is pretty easy to work with. It's not very good for high detailed sculpts. I do have monster clay, which I need to test out at some point, but for very simple sculpts this is pretty good. When it gets quite warm though, it does tend to get very sticky. That's why it's not good for small details, but we're just going to use this stuff to work on the sand dunes. Oil-based clay is better than air drying clay if you're doing stuff for moulds, because, well, basically, number one, you can reuse it as long as it doesn't stay in the silicone. Like if you cast something and you leave the cast for a couple of days, and the actual silicone mould will draw all the moisture out the clay and make it so you can't reuse the clay. But also it doesn't shrink when it dries, because I discovered when I was trying to do a like a sort of a mask, my first time at sculpting a mask on a head, the air drying clay that I was using shrunk overnight and it cracked because it shrinks and there's nowhere for it to go because it's on something. So if you're getting into moulding, look at for oil clays and monster clay for all the bigger stuff. So little tips there. So we'll just work our way. We're gonna make it look better than that. We're making the sand dunes out of this. So it's a bit cold in here. We're gonna have to warm this up a little bit, make it a bit more malleable. And the final part that has been added is a tiny little Threepio made from a casting of a micro machine. Now, I didn't have any silicone left, so I used a little technique of actually pressing the micro machine figure into some clay. So I did one half, did another half, cast that in resin, took those resin halves out and stuck them together, sanded it down and gave it a little paint job. So now we have a Threepio standing next to a Krayt Dragon in the Tatooine sands. So there you go, that's how to make a little small Krayt Dragon diorama. I actually quite enjoyed doing these. Tatooine is one of my favourite planets and it was just a cool little idea, so I'm going to take a couple of these and see if I can sell them at Walker Stalker. If not, if I've got at least one left, at least I have something to put on display because I quite like them. So as always, big thank you goes out to my supporters on Patreon, especially to Jeff Kenny and to Mortarian. Remember, if you like what I do, please share my videos and subscribe for more stuff like this in the future, and check out some of the other builds that I've done. I'll see you in the next one, and as always, may the Force be with you.